Mr. Y.S. Narayan, and gives me pleasure to say a few words about him. Narayan, most popularly known in professional circles as YSN, uh, is the Chief Executive Officer of the IIITB Innovation Center and the Chief Executive Officer of the Outreach in IIIT Bangalore. A hardcore ABC advertising, branding, and corporate communications professional, he brings with him over 35 years of experience in blue chip MNCs, leading Indian companies, predominantly in the ITES, banking, and finance industries. Also, he has worked for many big brands like Ma Buzel, Ogilvy One, Worldwide, and Contract Advertising were some of the ad advertisencies where he contributed to building some great brands for their clients. In the corporate communication space, he has held leadership positions in companies like Satyam Computers, HSBC, Deloitte, and Microsoft, amongst others. YSN's area of expertise includes employee communication, executive communications, event management, marketing communications, public relations, digital marketing, and CSR initiatives. He also has international work experience, having worked in the United States and China for several years. Prior to joining IIIT Bangalore, YSN was General Manager and Head of Corporate Communications in Seaway Shipping and Logistics Limited, Hyderabad, and I'm sure you all are going to benefit from this session immensely on personal branding. Thank you so much, and over to you, Mr. YSN.
Hey, thank you, Karthik. Always, whenever someone introduces the speaker, I know it is quite a task, taking into consideration that you are talking about someone's experience over decades to be encapsulated in a few seconds or at the most a minute, and it hardly does justice to them. But anyway, thanks for a wonderful introduction, Karthik. Good evening, everyone. Fantastic to be here. Feels great. Over the last 5 sessions, we have heard a lot. We have had some really interesting and very insightful sessions where we started off with Madan talking about are you an entrepreneur? Then we had Ujjwal Trivedi talking about the business model canvas. Then Gautam spoke about startup metrics, while Nanda shared with us some great insights about how to go about and profile your ideal customers. And of course, yesterday we had this very invigorating and a great session from the director of IIITB, Professor Sadagopan, who spoke about Indians solving India's problems. So welcome to the sixth session of the bootcamp for aspiring entrepreneurs in 2021. And I'm really glad to be here amidst us. So before I get started, I would just like to set some right expectations amongst you all. To start with, I know that given the profile of most of the participants out here who are very young, who are mostly from an engineering background, who may not have as in-depth knowledge or expertise in terms of how to go about building brands. So you might find this particular session slightly different because I'm not going to talk about specifically how do you build your company as a brand or the different products or services that you offer to your customers. I just want you to all pause, sit back, and think, did you ever look at yourself as a brand? As every individual, we are brands, right? So in this session, I'm just going to talk a little bit. So the way I have structured is that out of the 1 hour, of course, so we are about 10 minutes into the session. I'll probably present my thoughts and views, share some interesting, hopefully interesting information on how to go about building a personal brand for about 30 minutes. And then we would like to open up the floor to you all to ask questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them directly. Right? So here we go. All right. I hope you're all able to see my screen.
Yes, sir.
So this session is all going to be about you, right? So it's all going to be talking about personal branding and you. So let's get to the bottom of what this is all about. Before we actually get into personal branding, I think it would be interesting for us to actually understand a little bit more about the brief history of branding. All right. So we keep on loosely using the word brands. Most of us do understand a little bit or got a fair bit of understanding about what brands are and how they work. We have heard just 2 days back another talk about brands being the emotional connect between the customer and the product or service that's being offered. So we've heard a little bit of that. I'm quite sure if you're saying, oh no, one more session on the same thing, it's not. We're going to talk about something different. But before we get on to that, I would just like to quickly take you all through a brief history of branding because this sets the context for what the personal branding is all about. Let us go back memory lane. Let's go back a good 70 years. All right. In the 50s, we had, that's when the moniker that you use today, mostly your USP or the unique selling proposition was first actually formed. During this time, the physical product and not the brand was the core differential. Let us, for example, look step back and look at that point of time in India, if you really wanted some reliable footwear and you're looking at shoes, looking at some really high quality footwear, the name which immediately popped into one's mind was Bata, right? Of course, it's a different ball game now, but we're talking about the 50s. And similarly, if you look at truly Indian brands which actually managed to build a category on its own, you have got a fantastic case study in the form of Parle, which actually came out with Parle Gluco biscuits. Then, of course, it was renamed as Parle G later, but Parle Gluco biscuit was a mass product, and it was a huge hit with the Indians. Similarly, when Coke first came into India, of course, it had quite an turbulent existence out here. It was banned for some time. Again, it came back. But at that point of time, if someone wanted to have a cool drink was Coke, is what they were actually referring to. Give me a Coke, right? Of course, this is, as I'm saying, USP can hardly be claimed by any product because it's no longer unique. There's a lot of similarities between one brand and the other, and nothing's really unique anymore. But let us see what has happened over the time. Let us step into the next era, the next decade of 60s. So from USP, we moved on to what we call as ESP, which is the emotional selling proposition. Now, that was when Pepsi was introduced. They came a good 15, 20 years later after Coke was introduced. And then both of them actually, if you look at it, you take two empty glasses, you pour a bottle of Coke in one, a bottle of Pepsi in another, and then you hide away the bottles from which the Coke and the Pepsi liquid was poured, drink was poured, and if you gave it to someone, there was very little likelihood of someone really knowing the difference between the two. So in such a case, how did the companies go about creating a unique identity for themselves? So that's when they went about and said, Coke is much more of a serious brand, much more of a mature brand, and Coke is the original. So Pepsi thumbed their nose at them, saying, "It is well, Coke is for fuddy duddies, Pepsi is for the younger generation." So it became more of an emotion. They tried selling the brand based on emotions, and the physical attributes of the product itself was not really very important. So in this particular case, we're talking about consumers tending to drink the label and not the actual liquid itself. Fast forward 20 years later to the 80s, and that's when you had a massive brand like Nike, which burst into the market and still continues to hold the awe and admiration and has become a cult brand of its own. So that's when OSP, or the organization selling proposition, was first introduced. In fact, Nike kind of opened up this entire category of OSP, and they said Nike does not necessarily mean only shoes. Of course, that's what they were always known for. But beyond that, Nike said Nike became more of saying we as a company, we are all about. That's when they just do it. Part of it also came into the picture a little while later, and then they said it does not necessarily restrict ourselves to only selling footwear, of course, which was the biggest brand with biggest product category, but going beyond that to anything which enhances the performance of those who use their product. So anything ranging from a cap to whether it could be a balls or golf balls or even attire. So suddenly the company became bigger than the brand. The next decade, that is the 90s, saw actually brands coming into their own. And that's when we started seeing what the concept was as the brand selling proposition, or BSP, as we would like to call it. Here, step back and look at it. It's quite funny. Look at something like Harry Potter, right? Now, Harry Potter is a fictional character created by J.K. Rowling, which you all know. But when you actually looked at Harry Potter as a brand, it opened up again an entirely different category, because this was a category of a virtual, I mean, of an imaginary or fictional character, like a Pokemon, right? And then they actually started using the physical attributes. So they had a lot of from the Harry Potter movies. They had Harry Potter merchandise. Similarly, Pokemon became a huge character, a huge hit as a character, and then they actually started sponsoring even soccer teams. They had their own soccer team in the U.S. M&M's again, which is a very huge brand in Europe and the U.S. and other markets. They started getting into sponsoring racing films. So here, in this particular era, the brand became stronger than the physical dimension of the product, because Harry Potter is a fiction; it's a fictional character. Pokemon is a fictional character. So how do they get into this entire aspect? How do they build a brand around something which is fictional? And this is a great example of how they went about doing it. When in the 21st century, uh, we saw again a new category opening up, which was MSP. So we have the me selling propositions. The very interesting, huge step, of progress which happened in this particular case was simple. All the time earlier, companies owned brands. Companies controlled the narrative in terms of how they wanted the brands to be perceived. But suddenly, when in the with the 21st century, we started seeing a huge difference where consumers started taking ownership of the brands, right? So you had personalized labels. So which means what? The company turned around and something like Levi's turned around and said, "Hey, we are not just going to we are not going to produce mass jeans. We'll customize it to what you want. You tell us as an individual customer what kind of fit you would like, what kind of color you would like, what kind of fabric you would like, what kind of cut you would like, and we'll be happy to customize one to suit your specific body, because no two bodies are alike." And similarly, Nike went about creating Nike ID, where also said no two feet are alike. While of course there are a certain amount of mass-produced shoes, we're also happy to customize them. So this was a very interesting turn which it took, where customers started taking ownership of the brands. So we had a journey of around 50 years, from 1950s to the 2000s. We spoke about uh, USP, ESP. We talk about BHP, VSP, and now let us look at what the future looks like. A little bit of crystal ball gazing, which is already there. It is not exactly the future; it's more in terms of what we're experiencing at present. We're talking about holistic buying proposition, or HBP in short. If you look at each one of the six senses that we have, the smell, sight, sound, touch, taste, and and touch, and how each one of them are actually going to play a huge role in terms of building the brands. We've often heard this in the last few sessions, where we spoke about how branding is all about forming an emotional attachment between the brand and the consumer. So it is not necessarily a rational decision where you just evaluate a particular product or a brand and turn around and say, well, if something does well on specific parameters of price, taste, quality, or availability, or whatever, those are the most important things. It's gone far beyond that. So that's what we are talking about, even in this context. So what is a holistic brand? It's a complete multisensory approach where the sum is less than the brand is greater than the sum of the parts. So if you take a typical, if you allot, let us say, a weight of around 2 to each one of these five senses of vision, sound, smell, taste, and touch, it should add up to 10, right? Wrong. Actually, it adds up to 20. Now, why are we saying that? Because it is not a matter of just saying that each one of them has got a particular weight, but when they start working with each other, the strength of each one of the experiences which a particular sense delivers is extremely strong. Let us take some great examples of how what we're talking about in terms of a holistic brand. I'm quite sure almost all of us here would have seen Starbucks. Some of them might have tasted or gone to Starbucks outlets to have had grabbed some coffee or the snacks out there. Howard Schultz, who actually built Starbucks from scratch, and he's considered to be the pioneer and one of the greatest brand builders in the US, because it's a relatively new brand which is built from scratch and it's become one of the most iconic cult brands in this of the century. Right? He says we are not in the coffee business serving coffee. He says, but we are the people business serving coffee. Coffee business serving people, but we're the people business serving coffee. What he says is very simple. It's all about people, so irrespective of whether you are selling a cup of coffee or whether you are offering some other product or service as you aspiring entrepreneurs or some of you already are doing. This goes far beyond what you are selling, what you are marketing, what you're producing. We're talking about how we can actually create a complete experience around it. Again, take a look at Starbucks coffee, right? So there's a sensory uniqueness. And it is not just, of course, the smell and taste of coffee, which is great. But again, if you go to others also, more or less in any good selling, good coffee, high quality coffee gives out a certain aroma. So it makes you feel good. But beyond that, they went on to create a wonderful ambience, which would be unique to Starbucks and it will be replicated across the world. So whether it's interior design of its cafes or its green and white logo, which talks about the uniqueness of the way the experience is delivered to you. So when you drink a coffee in the Starbucks cafe, as compared to take the Starbucks coffee and drink it outside, there's a little bit of difference in the way you experience the entire drinking. So let's look at any of all these 5 different sensors we were talking about. Look at visual, look at the way they went about doing it. It's a unique logo on building, whether it is cups and bags. Again, when it came down to the way a customer experiences through their sight and sounds which they hear, again, there was a uniform and customer approach all through the world, wherever they had their outlets. Similarly, the kind of texture used on the furniture out there, the walls, the doors, everything was done in such a way that it gave the same unique experience across all its outlets. And of course, the distinct aroma of freshly ground coffee was something which, the moment which hit your nostrils, and it went in, you could wait to stand in the queue and hand over your money to order for your fresh cup of ground coffee, right? So each one of the senses were brought into play when we're talking about a holistic branding experience. So what is a brand? In other words, it is a belief system, right? It's what you believe in. Now let's come to the interesting part of what you would like to see more of: personal branding. So the first few slides, I set the context in terms of trying to give you a fair idea in terms of how brands themselves have progressed over the decades. That's number one. But more than anything else, I just wanted to tell you that what you saw now till now is, when building a physical brand, applies the same logic, the same steps applies when you want to build your personal brand. So what exactly is a personal brand? On one hand is how you see yourself. On the other is how others see you. And when they come together, the section where you have how you are seen and how others see yourself is where your personal brand actually starts getting built. Now, what do we mean by that? Let's try to understand a little bit more about personal branding. If you just want to quickly turn around and say that it's a process whereby people like you and me and each one of us out here, irrespective of whichever stage of our career that we are in. We could someone who could just be fresh out of college or still, studying in a university, or there could be someone who has very senior and professional with a lot of experience behind them. Irrespective of that fact, personal branding is something which is applicable to each and every one of us at every stage of our lives. So while previous self-help management techniques spoke a lot about how to win friends and influence people, how to present better, how to make presentations, etc. These personal branding concept actually came from the very, very strong understanding that success comes from packaging ourselves in a manner that is relevant to our audience, right? Now, if you say that, if it's just limited to the way we look or the clothing that we wear, our appearance, or the limit or the extent of whether we are a subject matter expert, uh, some deep expertise, or a generalist on in a particular subject. The whole point is, as we keep on saying, we look at what really differentiates us. If you look at the reason why even today they use thumbprints, right? I mean, that's the most unique thing. While there are 1.3 billion people in India, and we're talking about probably 7 billion people across the world, uh, each one of us are uniquely different. Is uniquely different, and just like the fingerprints that each one of us really have, even personal branding actually, uh, Tom Peters again was one of the gurus in management, and he actually went around and spoke about, at first introduced this term of personal branding in 1997, and since then on, it has really been gaining a lot of traction. So, how does this work? I'm quite sure most of you must have seen the just erstwhile president of the US, Donald Trump. How you've heard a lot, you would have seen a lot about how he became famous, how he went about claiming that when he does something, ranging right from the uh, the, uh, the Shark Tank kind of competitions that he had, or the various kinds of buildings that he built, and where he went about branding those buildings using his own name on that. So suddenly, that's where the man's brand itself far superseded, exceeded that of the actual benefits being offered by what he was offering, in this particular case, buildings. Otherwise, the building was a building. But if someone said it is a Trump Towers, at least he would have loved to believe that it really made a difference to the residents there who are willing to pay a premium. So this is another interesting article which I came across, a framework. It is called Personal Branding Framework. And how does it really work? So if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, you have a tangible brand elements, which turns around and say, hey, what am I as a person? What do I do? Am I a writer? Am I an author? Am I an engineer? Am I a doctor? Am I a lawyer? Uh, am I an inventor? Whoever it is, right? So how do I build credibility around it? What can I do to turn around and actually give demonstrable evidence that I am whom I claim to be? If I say that I am a great author, I can, if I have turned around, say I have by now produced about 8 books, I have sold some 200 million copies of these 8 books, or something on those lines, that gives credibility. So what are my strengths? I mean, let us do an honest assessment of our own strengths and what has been demonstrated to the kind of work that we have done. What kind of skills do I possess? What is it that I believe in? What are my core values? What are the things which are non-negotiable, right? And more than anything else, if you have actually learned to answer the question, which still is a huge dilemma for most of us: what is the purpose of my life? Okay, what is my purpose? Why do I live? Why do I exist, as a person or as a professional in whatever capacity? So while these would apply as much for an a company or the products which entrepreneurs like you offer, your personal brand framework also considers your overall purpose and values, and how do you bring them to life through daily practice, through daily touch points. So, in essence, what we're talking about is that your personal brand tells the world about you as a person. Your brand tells the world what you stand for, what your values are, what your expertise is, and ultimately, why the world should even care about what you claim. If at the end of it that you can say whatever that you want, but you just have people who go around without really caring for who you are or what you do, then you need to step back and see what can you do to make it more relevant to them. How can you get noticed, right? I mean, the whole purpose of the word brand is how do you make something stand apart from everything else around it, and how do you start building upon the core strengths which are available in a particular brand. So that's what a personal brand also does in this specific context. Typically, what we do is, I have conducted many workshops in the past, and typically those are physical workshops. So as part of the 2.5 hours workshop, we do have a worksheet which is actually given to all the participants, and they actually take some time off, or 30 minutes or 45 minutes to fill this in, to help them get a better understanding of how to go about actually understanding what it's all about. So there are around 8 steps here. So what I would actually do is, at the end of this session, I'd be happy to share this specific form, which you can actually download. You can actually start using them, and I'll be happy to go ahead and give you direction or guidance if required. You can reach out to me in terms of how do you go about actually using this form to understand more about who you are as a personal brand. I mean, what's your personal brand all about as an individual, right? This is something interesting which I came across. The audience out here, most of you are budding entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and business persons. Why do someone like you need personal branding? Just take a look at Richard Branson, right? All of us have heard of Richard Branson. And he has 11.3 million followers on Twitter. But the brands or the properties which he owns, which is Virgin Atlantic, has around 556,000 followers. Virgin Galactic about 171,000 followers, and Virgin Media, which are all huge empires in their own right and market leaders, have got about 225,000 followers. So the man here, Richard Branson, as a brand, due to his personal branding, is far, far higher than that of the individual brands that he owns. And as is declared on his profile, it's very, very interesting way of putting it, is saying that he hates informality. So he is a tie-loathing adventurer. He has been a great philanthropist, and he says he's someone who's out to disrupt the market, right? And so he says, I am a troublemaker, and who believe in turning ideas into reality. So this is a classic case where someone like Richard Branson has used his personal brand to support his very different ventures and get people to buy into his companies. Now, the flip side of this also is sometimes if the person around which the brand is built, now the classic case being Donald Trump, uh, if when he was the president of the United States, while he was a very, very powerful person, but there was the electorate in the US was deeply polarized. And while you had one set of followers who would turn around and swear by Donald Trump, there was the other set who would swear at Donald Trump, right? So there is a flip side to it in the case of people like Richard Branson, because some of the stuff which is done also has not taken off as much as he had wished he would. Right now, he's in a little bit of a spot in terms of his financial picture, but knowing him, one would presume that he's going to come out of it uh, with all guns blazing. So this is the last part of this particular session. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some great tips to build your personal brand. To start with, become an expert source, which means what? Irrespective, again, I would like to reiterate here, irrespective of the fact whether you are someone who has just yet to get out of college or someone with a lot of experience behind you, over a period of time, all of us need to be experts at something that we do. So whether you can demonstrate your expertise by blogging, writing an article, you can become an expert source for reporters, you can become a thought leader by representing your company at major forums. So make sure that you are well prepared to do so in the event of someone approaching you to speak at an event or whatever, saying that you have a current photo, bio, resume, etc. Second is, it is very, very important for us. All of us have learned it, heard a lot about it, in saying, how do you go on to become one of the main factors or parameters that is required for someone to be successful in their career or even in the personal life is to be able to communicate well. So it's a very, very crucial factor for professional mobility. So if you believe that this is an area where you're not very strong at this point, but you would like to strengthen it, do look at the lot of resources available like Toastmasters, or you can even hire a communications coach if you are at a much more mature state of your professional career, to ensure that your written and verbal skills are at their best. We heard the Nanda Kumar, we heard Gautam and Ujjwal talking about various ways you can go about creating strategies for your business, right? So, and we said, how do you go about creating a marketing plan? Look at the size of the market. Look at where does your product or service, how does it make a difference to its consumers, etc. Now, apply those same principles to yourselves as a person, as an individual. So here we are talking about, why don't you start looking at actually drafting a marketing plan for yourself at least once a year, and every 3 months renew it. So what does this plan look like? It says like typically what you have for your business, where you say what kind of sales you'll be looking at, what kind of revenues you should be looking at, how many in how many locations, or what kind of geographical spread should your products or services be available, etc. The same thing would hold good in terms of saying, drop your plan saying for the next 5 years, next 3 years, or next 1 year, and then every 3 months or 6 months, start looking at what kind of progress you're making against those plans you've set for yourself as a person, right? Another area which you have all of us would have heard a lot is what's the elevator pitch actually, or elevator speech, right? Typically, it is as simple as this. Assume a scenario where you work in a smaller organization, and that organization is based in a building which has got around, let's say, 15 floors. You have got some of the top-notch MNCs working in the same building. And one day, and you always had admiration to work with some of the larger or more well-known brands, or even could be a smaller company, but someone who does some great work, and you would have loved to be a part of the team. Assume a scenario where you get into an elevator and you suddenly find that you're face to face with the CEO or the head of HR of that particular company. And you said, wow, this is a great opportunity. So from the time that person presses the button to his floor, which is probably on the 10th or 11th floor, and the time it takes to go from the ground to the 11th floor could possibly be a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever time. How do you go about striking a conversation with that key decision maker? How do you grab that moment and try to sell yourself? That's what the elevator pitch is all about, right? So if you can actually start talking about yourself, as and build and convey what you want, what makes you different from others, what is it that you want to achieve, how can you help the organization or someone else achieve their goals, and all this to be done in 60 to 90 seconds. Remember that. That is the elevator pitch or the elevator speech we're talking about. And this is something which is very, very interesting, because it kind of forces you to start looking at condensing whatever that you know into those few words, which will help you to make an indelible impression on the minds of the person with whom you're interacting. The importance of networking can never ever be underestimated. Do keep on building your network. So make new business contacts, going beyond LinkedIn, of course, and stay in touch with them. Most people with powerful brands have powerful friends. So people can come in, can be a huge, huge source of helping you to achieve your dreams. More than anything else, when you interact with them, you start getting a lot of good feedback about yourself from them. When I say good feedback, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which will help you to become a better person, which will help you to stay relevant to the needs of the market. So building your network is one of the key factors, critical success factors, I would say, for you to succeed in the world of business or the corporate world. Point number six, very often, again, we have heard of managers managing their teams, but I would just like all of you to step back a little bit also and say, how do you manage your manager? How well are you able to manage your manager? Now, I'm not referring to manipulating your manager in any way, but able to understand what is it that you can do to make your manager or your boss be successful in what they do, right? So if you're able to realize that your boss can be a great ally or an enemy in building your brand, believe me, I can say with a certain amount of absolute, speaking from my own personal experience of having worked for the last 35 years, this is something which is very, very underestimated, because a good manager, a good boss can make a lot of difference in terms of giving you the right feedback, helping to build the team, helping you to discover yourself, and giving critical feedback in a manner that will help you to grow. So unless and equipping you with all the tools and processes or whatever that is required to be successful at what you do. So and if you have a good ally, good friend in your boss, very often than not, it can help you to. I'm not talking about saying that this has got nothing to do with managing office politics. That's a very different thing altogether. But we should. Our whole point is each one of us need to do to contribute to the success of the others, and your boss can play a huge role in this aspect. Now, in the entrepreneurial world, probably some of you might, as engineers or as technocrats, you might feel that what you do is more important than what you look like. Maybe to some extent it is true, maybe it is not. So again, this is something which makes a lot of sense, which says just for the job you want, not the job that you currently have. So on one hand, no one is asking you to go about, any of us to go about and conform to what exactly the society wants, but striking the right balance between what we wear and what others would like to see us wearing is the secret of success out here. The next point is becoming a class act. What do we mean by that? Times change, styles change, but good manners, good business, and good social etiquette never changes, right? So in today's context where everything is done by mail, it has become anonymous. We are all hiding behind mails to a large extent. Everything has become very, very, you would say, with very little distinction. So if you want to differentiate yourself from others, try to do a little things a little bit different. Once in a while, you can start. You can actually have your own personal stationery. You can send handwritten notes once in a while. Uh, and if you even go to a restaurant, you can even pick up some tips in terms of how to order a fine bottle of wine, because some of these things are something which are really valued a lot. I'm quite sure some of you might also have heard about the way someone from an American businessman or an American corporate person, you know, interacts with people in public as compared to someone from an Asian country like Japan. So they're very, very different, right? And it helps for us to know their cultures. It helps for us to know what would make them comfortable when we are interacting with them. So good social and business etiquettes go a long way in helping us build a personal brand. Point number 9 might as not as be relevant to us out here, but for example, this would probably be more relevant to someone in the uh, limelight, like someone who's in the fashion industry, someone who's in the movie industry, someone who's in the entertainment industry, because whom they date, whom they go around with, what they do also affects their brand, right? To a large extent, that's how they actually manage to stay in the eyes of the public and help to build a brand. Last but not the least, please do something to give back to society. It could be time, it could be your talent, it could be money to charitable causes, but whatever it is, do it not just as a gimmick, don't do it just to get publicity, but do it to something to make you feel good. And when you feel good about what you are doing, when your endorphins kick in and it makes you feel good, that's when actually you start actually becoming a better person. So find a cause that you're passionate about and unstintingly give it all that you have got. All of us, whether we like it or not, leave behind personal brand footprints. What do we mean by that? If you look at human imprints, whether it's the kind of business cards that we give, human relationships that we build, whether it's the kind of physical health that we have, reputation, character, trademarks, or if you look at digital footprints, of course, the blogs that we write, which is there out in the world, social networks of which we are members of, right? Online reputation management, e-brand assets. So you have offline and online. You got human and digital. So the point is, how well does your brand translate both offline and online? What type of impression are you making, and what is the impact of your brand? You need to ask yourself those questions. And this is where I would like you to go back to that example which I gave of Starbucks. What has Starbucks done? They have ensured that they provide a consistently positive experience across all touch points with their consumers, right? So whether it is the color of the logo, the way, the kind of the kind of coffee beans that they have, the aroma which it gives out, the kind of environment which they have out there. Every Starbucks cafe offers free Wi-Fi to its consumers. So they offer a consistent experience across all the touch points to their customers. Remember, these are some few points that I would like to end this session with. Please do not do things just to get attention. If you're a fake, you will easily be caught and it will do further reputation to your brand. So stay true to who you are. Focus on building your brand in a positive light because you will have more rewards later and less stress, right? Which is self-explanatory by itself. And sometimes we've all heard of this old proverb, right? Tell me who your friends are, and they'll tell what kind of person you are. Now that's again a case of personal branding, right? So when if you're the company of someone who society does not look up to, then probably they will start questioning your credentials. So similarly, if you're working with it can brush off on you the good and the bad part of it. You can work with some great companies, or if you can look at the kind of places, it could even be a small setup that if the kind of work which you do speaks for itself, that builds your brand. And we are all human beings, guys. So sometimes we tend to really mess up. And when that happens, the best thing is to acknowledge that we have messed up. Uh, and otherwise, in today's context, unlike the earlier days, a small slip up there and you are done, right? Social media takes over, a small slip up here or there, and bad word gets out faster than a good one. And that can do irreparable damage to your brand. So just ensure that if you do mess up somewhere, own up, clean up, and then move on. And just remember this is the most important part. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. No amount of personal branding is going to happen overnight, right? It's a long-term process. So even if you attract a lot of attention with whatever that you do today, and if it comes across as something which is looked at more as a stunt, your brand is definitely going to get impacted in the future based on what you do today. So whatever that you're going to do today, you might not feel the impact right away, but a few years down the line, you might actually see it. I mean, they're very classic cases. A lot of people, right? I mean, you have had everyone, a lot of celebrities who 10 years back have gone ahead and posted some insensitive comments about racial bias or homophobia or any of those, and it's come back to haunt them today. So this is an aspect which you need to be aware of. So whatever that you are doing, please ensure that don't look at just today, look at the future, and be very, very careful about what you're projecting yourself as. So we come almost to the end of this presentation, session rather. Your brand, your personal brand is one of your greatest business assets. I mean, it's not something which all of it, many of us have really looked at it this way. So I would strongly urge you to look at this. Nurture your brand, and then you will nurture your career. So thank you, everyone. And I would like to request Manoj or Karthik to probably open up the floor. And I'm happy to take a few questions from some of our participants.
Thank you, sir. On that note, some of you can post questions or you can raise your hand so Mr. Manoj can unmute you. And if you could stop the screen share. Manoj?
Sir?
Yeah, if you can come to screen mode.
Narayan sir, can you stop sharing?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my mistake, sorry.
Thank you. Okay.
There's
if
one
anyone
question
wants
about-
to ask a question, you can raise your hand or you can put it in the chat box. Please go ahead. Okay, the first one says, can we say Elon Musk is doing a personal branding because they don't advertise the products at all?
Elon Musk obviously is bigger than Tesla, while Tesla as a product, and my personal take is that while Tesla as a product has been phenomenal well before its time and something which has struck a right chord, yes, Elon Musk as a personal brand has more or less stayed on top of Tesla. Elon Musk, because you're talking about SpaceX, I know, again, it's not necessarily Tesla, but again, Elon Musk, the moment you say Elon Musk, obviously his own personality has managed to overpower that of his personal brands.
Okay. So on that note, anyone who wants to ask a question personally can raise their hand. And the next question says, any suggestions on image makeover for personal branding and how to go about it?
Right. So as I said earlier, this is not like a make-up. This is not a makeover, image makeover, right? I mean, if today, for whatever reason, a particular individual is seen or perceived to against a particular set of characteristics as someone, whatever it is, it cannot be. First of all, you will have to understand why you are perceived the way you are perceived. And then you go ahead and actually start working over a longer period of time to address those specific issues. And how do I get back from, if at all it's something negative, how do I get back from negative to neutral and from neutral to positive? So this is not, as I said in the last slide, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. There's something where a lot of effort has to be put in, but it is not as much as an image makeover, but personal branding is what you do through your actions consistently over a period of time. That's what it all boils down to.
And also, is it necessary to make online brand presence for a B2G product? Does it mean business to government?
Business to government, yeah. Business to government, yes. Yep. So my take is, irrespective of whom you deal with in today's world, everything, unless and until your digital, remember what I said earlier, what you say and what you do across all your touch points have to be consistent. So which means whether online or offline or in the digital world, there has to be a similar experience, a similar promise, and a similar strong online presence or an offline presence for any category, irrespective of whether it is a B2B, a B2C, or a B2G. Because at the end of the day, we don't exist in isolation. Even for someone to find, even though, I'm just giving an example out here. One of the biggest success stories of IIITB has been MOSIP, okay, modular open source platform, which we have nurtured, and they are growing at exponential pace. It's a digital identity for public good, which MOSIP is all about, and they deal only with governments, right? But in spite of it, a lot of effort goes behind creating a consistent brand experience across all the touch points, which means whether it is a website or whether it's social media posts or whether it's the kind of thought leadership articles that they do, the kind of presence which they have across various platforms, all of them have to be consistent. So yes, to answer your question, a strong online or an offline presence is equally important, irrespective of the product category that you are in, whether it's a B2B, a B2C, or a B2G. I see one of the question out here asked by Harsimran Pasi. How do we make people trust our brand where we are at its initial stage? Harsimran, the point I'm trying to make here is very simple. There are two aspects to it, right? Whether you are you yourself as a young person or a brand, or whether the product or service that you offer from your startup, which is still yet to prove itself as a brand, at the end of it, brand is built over a period of time through consistently same kind of experiences. Okay, so you cannot build a brand overnight. A brand is built over a period of time. So let us assume that you're talking about, as the initial stage, this is a startup. So over a period of 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, as you slowly start giving your consumers or the users or your customers the same kind of positive experience, and as long as you are able to actually demonstrate what you are talking about in terms of what your product or service does, or what you as a personal brand, as a person, or you're reliable, or you're trustworthy, or you're someone who is passionate about what you do, and you're someone who's willing to walk the talk. Okay, if you're able to actually demonstrate these characteristics over a period of time, that's how you build your own personal brand. And going by the same logic, if your products or service offers that kind of reliability and trustworthiness and credibility and great value for money, or the kind of effectiveness which it offers, that's how actually you go about building a brand over a period of time. Yes, we will share this worksheet. I will send it out to you, or you can download it later. And what I would also suggest is probably at the end of this, the entire bootcamp, it will be great by that time if you could spend time, start filling up this form. These are exercises which forces you to start looking at things in a much more structured manner. How do you go about building your personal brand, right?
Sure.
And I'll be more than happy at that point of time. As I said, I'll leave my mail ID behind, and you're more than happy to guide any of you should you need any direction or guidance on this front.
Sure. Thank you, sir. The next question says, sir, I still didn't get it. Why you need to endorse our bosses for our personal brand? Could you explain this to us? Tip number 6.
I think whoever it is, let me clarify. I'm not saying we should endorse our bosses. I am saying just typically look at an organization. What happens in any organization, irrespective of whether it is I work in companies like Microsoft or HSBC or Deloitte, okay, or now in IIITB, okay, and quite sure many of you have worked in smaller or larger organizations. So it's a typical pyramid. So what happens in a pyramid? The organization exists for a particular purpose, right? There's a raison d'etre, and at the top, the organization has got organization goals. Those goals are broken down, and saying the CEO or the director or the MD or the chairman or whoever it is of an organization or a startup or a setup, whatever, irrespective of whatever the size could be, has got a goal to meet. People down the line have to align what they're doing to the goals of their bosses. This has got nothing to do with endorsing. This is about aligning your goals to that of what your bosses do. And then you go about trying to put the necessary systems, processes, and procedures in place, develop the skill sets, develop the competencies, develop the right attitude, etc., to be able to deliver against the goals of your boss. Now, your boss goes and delivers against the goals of his boss, his or her boss, and it goes right up to the top. And that's how the organization as a whole, and if you look at it as a pyramid, it moves from the bottom up right to the top, and that's how the organization meets its goals. So I would like to clarify, I'm saying your job, especially in larger organizations, is to turn around and ensure that whatever that you do, that your goals have to be aligned to that of your department's head, and it then cascades up right up to the organization or institute's head. So that's what it is. So it's nothing to do with endorsing your boss. Don't get that wrong, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that clarified, sir. Thank you. I think today's brands need a persona behind the brand or it loses its grip on the followers. If you're selling something, for example, B2C, people should know the person behind it or they don't engage. Am I right?
Um, it depends upon categories. It depends upon, I won't make a general statement saying that the person behind a particular company is more important than a product itself, right? Now, in some cases, for example, some of you of the slightly, probably some who are probably 30 or 35 years old out here, you know of Nirma as a brand, right? Now, at one point, Surf, which was a market leader, it got badly impacted by Nirma because Nirma came into the market and started offering their products at one third or one fourth the cost of what the Surf was. And it became a huge hit. So at that point of time, Karsanbhai Patel, who was the person behind it, became much more larger than Nirma as a brand itself. Everyone was speaking about Karsanbhai Patel at that point. Or look at today's context, like what happens with the Mukesh Ambani's group. Okay, so you have Jio as a product. Now everyone knows Jio is one of the fastest growing brands in the telecom industry, right? But having said that, everyone also knows the man behind it, with who is Mukesh Ambani. So whether it is a B2C or whether it could be a B2B, or as in case of B2G or whatever it is, depending upon the product category that one is in, one could turn around and say that sometimes the building the persona of the owner of that particular brand or the head of that particular company, it becomes more important. Take a look at a company like Microsoft today, or an IBM. Okay, you got Satya Nadella, you got heading Microsoft, or you have got someone like Sundar Pichai heading Google. Now, would you turn around and say that Sundar Pichai is bigger than Google? No, we are not. But yet, the moment you say Google, there's a certain amount of pride, especially as Indians, for us to turn around and say, yes, Sundar Pichai is heading it, or Satya Nadella is heading Microsoft. So as I was saying, it depends upon the kind of product category that we are talking about, and one cannot make a general statement saying that the persona of the person who is heading the organization is larger than that of the brands which are being sold from the consumer's perspective.
Yes, sir. The next question says, how do we know that how everyone else sees us as a personal brand? How do we get to know?
How do you know what you look like? When we see a mirror, that's how we know what we look like, right? The same thing would go good out here, would hold good out here, which means what? If we want to really do an analysis of how we are understood by our various stakeholders, right? Whether it is colleagues at work or peers, uh, our customers, our business partners, our vendors, etc., we can actually do an audit. We can actually do this through a dipstick study where we can actually get in touch with them. We can say, hey, I would like to understand more about how I'm perceived as a person. Okay, we don't not as a brand, but as a person, and this will help me to be a better me, right? Or make it more relevant to who I am without losing the identity of who I am. So you can actually take feedback from people around you, and just without reacting to any of them. And as I said, the trick here lies in the fact that on one hand, society expects us to conform to a certain set of rules in terms of how we should be. On the other, each one of us are different. Each one of us are unique. Each one of us bring to the table a certain set of competencies our own brand personality in terms of who we are as a person, as an individual, right? Like no five fingers of a hand are alike. Similarly, no two persons are alike. So the trick lies in, on one hand, meeting that minimum common expectation of society or with the stakeholders across the ecosystem with whom you interact. And second is being true to our personal self. So to answer your question in simple terms, it is as simple as ask people what they think about you, not maybe directly, but you can actually do it in a structured manner. And believe me, 90% of the time, I have done that in the past, and 90% of the time I've had people turn around and give me feedback. Some of them have not been good, but it has helped me to identify what are my blind spots and help me to start working on them.
Mr. Neeraj wants to talk. I'll let him answer.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Neeraj, you can speak.
Hi, I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes, Neeraj, please
Thank,
go ahead.
Sir, thank you very much for the session. I think this session was very, very complimentary to what Nandakumar actually gave,
True.
and it was very required according to me. So, sir, actually there was some conflict or some ambiguity in my mind, and that was regarding personal branding and identity. So, is there any conflict between these two, or is there any similarity? That's my question to you.
Brand, the moment you look at branding or any kind of brand, an integral component of brand is identity, right? Which means what? As I said earlier, like your fingerprint, which is unique to you, any particular brand, whether it is a product, a service, an offering, or as a person who you and I are as individuals, as human beings, we come with a certain set of traits or characteristics. So that is unique to us. So as a person, as an individual, so that is our identity. So that identity goes to form an integral part of the brand making process. So it is not two different things. When you talk about identity and brand, actually use it in the same breath, which is brand identity. But it's slightly redundant because I think both of them mean the same thing, more or less. Because identity means uniqueness, brand means uniqueness. So actually, we are talking about the same thing out here. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And one of the other questions is, what do you think is better for branding, quality or quantity for small brands?
My personal experience when you are starting off with a relatively smaller offering, when I say smaller offering, I mean someone with limited resources to go about building a brand, which can only be built over a period of time, is to just focus on making it relevant to your customer, to the user. So I would slightly rephrase that question saying that it is not just quality or quantity or price or availability or its unique characteristics. But at the end of the day, if the product or service that you are offering is something which is going to make a difference to the life of the person who is using it, reducing his or her pain point in whatever manner, that is what you should be looking at. Does it solve a problem in whatever manner? Does it make life easier for someone? So if you're going to look at a problem from as an opportunity from that perspective, then you can decide what is the most important thing, aspect or characteristic that is of topmost priority to the user, end user. Is it quality that the person is looking at, the existing set of products or services or solutions that the person using? If he or she is not happy with the quality, so therefore quality could be a huge differentiator to you. So you can look at the quality of your product. The same offered or product could be offered. For example, it could be just as a plain, a bottle of water. But the same bottle of water, how can you make it better in whatever manner, right? It's a quality. Second, of course, the quantity part of it. If there are people who look for value for money, which means that if you look at someone, 1 liter of water, I'm selling at probably 25 rupees. Probably for the same 25 rupees, I'm going to give you 2 liters of water, right? So there'll be quantity. So depending upon the product category, and the kind of consumer that you're looking at, you need to go about and start plugging at your product or service.
Thank you, sir. And one of the last questions is, what would you tell people to focus on as a starting point for building a personal brand?
Very, very simple. Start that process now. Whether you like it or not, you are building a brand yourself. You're doing it. Your brand is being built with or without your consent. What is a brand? A brand is what others perceive you as. Remember that first Venn diagram which I showed you? What you think you are, what others think you are, and then there is this intersection where they come together, and that's how personal brands are built. So every action, every thought, everything that each one of us we do day in and day out goes to form part of the personal brand. So there's no such thing as saying, when do I start? There's no question of your starting, or what do you need to do to start building your personal brand, because it is already there. Whether right from your school days, your college days, the way you interact with your friends at college, the way you interact with your faculty at college, or whether you start working in a startup, or tomorrow you join a larger organization and start interacting with your peers, with your colleagues at work, with your managers, with your senior leaders in the organization, whatever. Every time you interact with someone, you leave behind a certain piece of yourself with them. That's how you go about building a brand, right? That's how they perceive you. Is this person friendly? Is this person professional? Is this person reliable? Is this person trustworthy? Does this person play office politics, or does this person someone who is passionate about what he does? Is this a person someone who's extrovert or an introvert? Someone who's very good at presentation, someone who's very good at project management. So what you keep on doing over a period of time starts strengthening and building your brand. So just be aware of it. All the more reason this particular session is probably something where I would like you to step back at the end of the session and say, hey, I never really realized that whether I like it or not, I'm building my personal brand. So how do I ensure that I provide a consistently positive experience across all touch points to my users? I think that's the question you need to ask yourself.
Great, sir. Another one says, does rebranding as a brand have a negative aspect? How can the negativity be eliminated effectively? If yes.
Yeah. So rebranding actually, see, every brand goes through a life cycle. Okay. Every brand. You've got a lot of brand refreshers, as we call them, and rebranding. In the sense that sometimes a brand, when it was conceived or at that point of time, may no longer be relevant in today's context, because the tastes have changed, of the consumers have changed. What the product offers in terms of its benefits may no longer be as relevant it is as it was at the time when it was launched, etc. So when that happens, there's a very, very strong need to rebrand, right? There's no negative aspect of it at all. The very fact that you are rebranding means you are trying to stay relevant in the minds of your consumers, of the users. So rebranding is when you still got certain core attributes of what the brand offers. For example, you take a brand like Coke again, okay, like Coca-Cola. Now, what is the core attribute of Coca-Cola as a brand? It says that we help refresh you, right? That's what actually any brand would do, but that's a particular platform which they've kind of owned over a period of time. Okay, refreshing Coke, it will refresh your life, right? So, but in today's context, most of the younger generation they would probably prefer to go in for something which is a much more exciting brand, and that's how Thumbs Up, for example, in India, actually gave Coke and Pepsi a great run for the money, because they positioned themselves very clearly as something for someone. If you are the kind of person, because it's a stronger cola, and they said, if you are the kind of person who loves action, who loves adventure, who lives life on the edge, we are for you. So that was a separate brand. But Coke, if Coke tries to go into the region of saying we are also all about action, entertainment, and meant for the youth, etc., it's not going to strike a right chord. In fact, it will be diluting the brand completely. So you have to stay true to the core purpose of who you are as a product or as a brand, whether it's a brand or whether it's we as a personal brand, and then reinvent ourselves over a period of time to look at how we can stay relevant to the needs of our customers. So it is nothing negative about it at all. It's just a lot of work goes behind it. It's a very exciting process of rebranding, but one has to be very careful that when you rebrand, you do not dilute the core of who you are in terms of your brand identity.
Super, great. And I think the last question was what are the best platforms for digital marketing? And it's a wrap. So,
See,
uh,
as I was saying, I'm not really specifically talking about digital marketing as such out here, but again, I'd just like to stress only one point. More and more today, the world is, as we all know, we're moving towards a digital world. It has got its good and the bad aspects. The good aspect is that it helps us to build up our presence very quickly. It helps us to actually present ourselves in ways which were not possible earlier. And more importantly, it is something which we can quickly start building. But the negative part of it is if you make one false move today, this is something which could stay on there in cyberspace till God knows when, right? And it could come to haunt you back in the future. So just be very careful about how you go about your digital presence. I'm talking about whether it's your product, your company, your service, or you as a person on through your LinkedIn profile, or through blogs you write, or any kind of thing that you do out there. Just ensure that one has to be very, very careful when it comes to what we put out there. But we all know that digital identity today far exceeds the physical world that we are in, that we were in earlier. My generation was built up mostly on the physical identity, but today more and more we are moving towards digital identity. And I would presume, taking the profile of the audience here, participants into consideration, this is one area where you need to tread very, very carefully. So all the best to you all as you start moving into the exciting world of the entrepreneurship and business. There's a lot that all of us can learn from each other. As I keep on telling my young team also out here, Karthik, Manoj, and the others in the outreach team, every day is a learning experience. I learn a lot from them, and hopefully they'll learn a little bit from me. And similarly, I would strongly urge all of you participants out here to also network and learn from each other. I mean, that's a great way of building our own personal brands too.
thank you, sir. Thank you for that last hour and a half. I think all our participants really learned a lot.